Yeah, it's really 1 o'clock night now, but it's okay till now I'm not sleeping.
Well, thank you so
Miss
much
everybody.
Well, hi, everyone. I think we'll begin this event. Thank you so much for joining us today or tonight from where you are. I'm Jamie Austin, Director of Exhibitions and Public Programming at California College of the Arts. We're so excited to have you here. This event is organized in partnership with Real Time and Space in Oakland to celebrate the launch of the HIV Howler Issue 5, Time Plus Money. This artist talk is part of the HIV Howler in Conversation, an online program of conversations, artworks, and performances curated by Anthea Black and Jessica Whitbread, who are both here today as featured artists. We recognize that you're joining us from many locations around the world, and so I would like to lead us in a land acknowledgement from where I'm located. California College of the Arts campuses are located in Huichin and Yelamu, also known as Oakland and San Francisco, on the unceded territories of the Chochenyo and Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who have continuously lived upon this land since time immemorial. We recognize the historical discrimination and violence inflicted on indigenous peoples in California and the Americas, including their forced removal from ancestral lands and the deliberate and systematic destruction of their communities and cultures. We take this moment to recognize and be grateful for their continuous stewardship of the land. And thank you for joining us from where you are as well. This talk today is hosted by Kiko Lestrange as part of the Real Time and Space Virtual Artist Talk series. And now I'd like to introduce Kiko, who will share more about Real Time and Space and introduce our artists. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Kiko Lestrange. I am one of the 3 acting management at Real Time and Space. Real Time and Space is located across from the Oakland Museum in downtown Oakland area. We are 15 studios, 18 members, and part of our programming is our residency program, in which Anthea and Jessica were awarded this residency program, which is 6 weeks, in which we also host an artist talk, which we are all in today. Anthea Black is an artist and writer based in Toronto and Oakland, where they're a professor of print media at California College of the Arts. Jessica Whitbread is a queer activist, artist, and visual aids vanguard based in Toronto and Bulgaria. Together, they are partners, publishers, and co-editors of the HIV Howler, transmitting art and activism. HIV Howler is a limited edition art newspaper published by Anthea Black and Jessica Whitbread that focuses on global grassroots HIV art and cultural production. Artists have and continue to play a fundamental role in shaping broader societal understanding of HIV and working within communities that are most impacted by the virus. Queer and trans people, people who use drugs, sex workers, people of color, and indigenous peoples. Together we reflect the immediacy and urgency of global HIV/AIDS dialogues as well as their historical continuities. The HIV Howler is a forum for dialogue, a demand for aesthetic self-determination, a response to tokenism, and a guide to navigating the vibrational ambiguities between policy, pathology, and community. Without further ado, Anthea Black and Jessica Whitbread.
Hi, thank you so much for that amazing introduction.
Thank you. I'm gonna do some slide switching around so I can start the screen share as well. So give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Here it is. Okay.
Great.
How does that look to everybody? Can you see us and the paper?
Yes.
We can see both of you and the paper. It looks great.
Awesome. 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 Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much for coming. Jessica and I have been lovers for 8 years, and we've been publishers of the paper for 3 years. We've worked on this issue without seeing each other for about a year and a half. So we're happy to extend this like virtual bubble of love to between us to the whole community. And thank you for Real Time and Space for hosting us and being open to having a remote residency where we, are conducting a lot of our activities online, and also to CCA for supporting this project with a little bit of funding from the faculty exhibitions grant. And we just really are grateful to have this time together. So as we say in the beginning of the editorial, really this issue is from our hands to yours, with the big mask off, sloppy kiss and a sweaty dance party.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So great. So this is our fifth edition of the HIV Howler. Fifth. And what we do is we work with artists living with HIV all around the world, artists and cultural producers. I think that's important to say cultural producers, because many of the people featured in the HIV Howler don't necessarily identify as being artists, or but they definitely are activists, make culture, make beautiful things, write beautiful things, and participate in performance and video. This came, the HIV Howler came because me and Anthea wanted to make something beautiful and really step away from public health messaging and these kind of visuals that we normally see in the HIV response that are quite blasé and institutionalized. We know many people who create amazing, insightful, and impactful work, and we really wanted to feature that. All the work is of artists living with HIV, and they come from, I think, how many countries now, Anthea?
Oh my goodness.
I don't know, at least 20.
What would be amazing is if folks could put their name and the country that they're calling in from in the chat, because in our current issue, we have, yes, well, we'll talk about it, but
yeah.
I think we've heard from over artists living in about 25 countries. Actually amazing. We have an editorial advisory that helps us extend the global reach and really like continue conversations with communities that we might not necessarily personally know. So we just want to give an acknowledgement to our editorial advisory and the assistance and support that they give in grounding our work in a bigger dialogue. Those folks are Laura Angeles Tomas from Puerto Rico, Charles Ryan Long from Chicago, Mike Kiki from Toronto, who's been spending a lot of time in Amsterdam and Poland this year, Ted Kerr in New York, and Chiron Liu in Taipei, as well as Darian Taylor, who has a special place in our heart and is from Toronto. So we really started this project actually as like a combination of our two passions, my work in artist publishing and Jessica's work as a global AIDS activist. And our goal was to bring together material by artists living with HIV, not to necessarily publish work from what's defined as like the AIDS crisis, but to recognize that HIV and AIDS are ongoing and very much the reality for many folks. So we bring together a number of different types of documents in the actual paper. We always write an editorial, which we're going to talk about a little bit more for our time and money issue. And we include archival documents, work by artists, writers, and activists. And as Jessica said, we really consider it like our curatorial role to bring together folks who might consider their work professional artists, but also those who make work to survive and who make work as activism that really, really shifts the conversation. So we also really emphasize the importance of conversation and connection because we, in our relationships, spend so much time talking to each other.
Understatement.
Understatement, major understatement. The centerpiece of every issue is a conversation between two artists living with HIV that's more or less unscripted by us and not directed by an outside interviewer, but that is really a chance for us to like play matchmaker a little bit. And we've made some amazing matches. I just want to acknowledge the passing of Fred Weston this year, leaving a very big hole in our hearts. And Fred was part of issue 2 with Nancy Lemoynes, who is a Bay Area artist working here and is also a very special member of our community. So folks may have seen these issues, but if you haven't, we really encourage you to drop a note in the chat, and when we send out your copy of the new issue, we'll pop a second one in from one of our back issues as well. So our past issues have been about criminalization, medicalization, mentor mother, and this piece by Marcus Borton is really amazing, honoring the legacy of Essex Hemp Hill. Sex and pleasure. And then our most recent issue published last year for exhibition at SBC Gallery in Montreal, movement migration. And that brings us to our current issue. We're really excited to share and launch. So today we're going to show some artists, but we're not revealing the entire contents of the paper because we really want you to have the experience of holding the newspaper in your hands and that aspect of the intimacy of like why we actually publish and why we make a physical publication as opposed to considering our work only, transmitting online. But really, this is like a hands-to-hands kind of ethic, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of people ask us for in other places for PDFs, and that's not possible. We do a limited edition print, and we always give them for free to people living with HIV. In the past, we've normally paired the launch with, for instance, the International AIDS Conference or another gathering of sorts where a number of POS people might be to try to get many in many POS people's hands. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we couldn't do that this year, as well as the many events we had scheduled and planned with all of our artist collaborators in person at real time space. So amazing. Anthea designed this. Look how beautiful it is.
Thank you, Jessica. So Jessica hasn't even seen the physical paper yet. Yeah. It's also so interesting, like just, the critical kind of questions about what the relationship between print and digital publishing is. And for us, we really lean hard into the print focus because that is becoming more rare. But I think one of the things that we're sort of thinking about is how to increase access to the paper. And we may not go fully digital, but we're really excited about thinking about audio possibilities for the future. So yeah, let's take a second just to shout out the names of the artists. This cover image is by Bay Area artist Glammy Rose Spencer. We just love her. We'll talk a little bit more about her work in a second. In conversation with Jacob Bomey from Australia, Ron Athey from the West Coast here living in LA, Sveta, who's on our call today from Kyrgyzstan, Gabrielle Renzon from Mexico, Louisa Lindani from South Africa, and Francisco, you are here. Thank you for waving. Amazing piece. Dee Stoescu from Toronto via Romania, Lilina Cemento from Brazil, and Felix Rodriguez Rosa. Is Felix on the call? No, I don't think so. And then we also have contributions from Nancy Lemoyne's, Martha Mamiza, Sadie Brown, and Dean Crozier. And Dean, I think you're on the call, so take away. We'd love to see you. So yeah, let's get into
very late in Australia.
Yes, yeah, oh my goodness, yes, so late. So yeah, let's get into it. Time and money, what does it mean to us? Jess, we've had so many conversations about time and money over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's time and money actually came from a conversation that Anthea was having with Frederick Weston after our last launch in New York City of the last, I guess it was, this COVID thing really screws you, but your time. But so when we were in New York City launching the Howler, we went to a bar after and Fred was like, you gotta talk about money. And we're like, yeah, money. And as someone who's, a professional AIDS activist and artist, definitely I've seen the inequalities within the AIDS response and the AIDS movement, who gets paid, who almost no one's art is celebrated, what is expected for free. And so that's definitely where the money came from. Time within the 40 years of the HIV response, time is in long-term survivors, time is in children born with HIV who have had HIV for 30 plus years now. It has been, it's been a really interesting pairing to really go deep inside these two issues.
Mm-hmm. And I always kind of want to celebrate Jessica a little bit because she's so on the total vanguard, which is why she won the Visual AIDS Vanguard Award at least 4 years ago already.
Yeah,
this is a piece that she did. And it really, this piece is, I think, from 2015.
Yeah.
And it really highlighted, even at that time, the disparity between folks living with HIV and people in the movement who profit off of paused lives. And that snappy way of sort of spinning it and putting it back in the face of polite conversation, that question of talking about money is so loaded and it's considered so impolite. But really at the intersection of the arts and activism and HIV, there is this very huge disparity between artists' fees that people get paid, maybe academics who are writing or publishing or profiting, folks in AIDS service organizations or working in pharmaceutical companies. And, we all sometimes share spaces together, but it's very rare that there's actual transparency about how that financial aspect affects people living with HIV. And we usually kind of start our themes with conversation just we're in bed or we're on a date and we're okay, we really noticed in the last many years that the disparity between us and even our queer family was starting to get wider and wider and wider. And some uncomfortable conversations were happening when some of us in our very tight queer family cohort are living on disability. Some of us are rising in academia, and some of us are starting to work in fields like medicine or law and making more money than any of us really have ever imagined. So this gap is widening. And we wanted to bring that personal conversation to see, you know, how this question of the wage gap was affecting other artists. So we have so many amazing artists to celebrate in the issue. We're going to talk, we're going to go through some of them and share a few sneak peeks. And then we're going to talk about the wage survey for artists living with HIV that really came from this pairing of time and money. So I think we have a little sneak peek for everybody in the issue. So if you see your image, just please wave so people know.
So this was a really fun piece, an important piece in the paper, written by Loiso Lindani from South Africa, where she wanted to interview, she was trying to interview artists living with HIV in South Africa. She lives in the Eastern Cape, and she was really struggling to find artists openly living with HIV to engage and talk about their experiences and their art and their practice, because for fear of stigma and discrimination and further marginalization in the arts community. So Bitch Better Have My Money talks about the intersections of her, Martha, and Sadie, gender, race, HIV status, mental health, poverty, and it's really an amazing and strong piece. And I just really love, in particular, this portrait that Martha did. She has a few other ones in the next issue, in this issue. So when you open your paper, you'll see this piece.
And we always think we know what the theme is going to give us. And then we work with contributors and they challenge us. And the real challenge that came from this piece was the idea of disclosure. And within North America, there's very different sort of like level of dialogue about disclosure. And many of the artists internationally that we work with, it's just absolutely not possible for them to disclose their status in the context that they work for many reasons, like intense criminalization or fear of being stigmatized in their fields as artists, as models, as filmmakers. So this piece really reminded us we might try to really have a global conversation, but for some artists, it's not possible to have their name printed in an international publication. So continuing on to some amazing pieces. This is Lilina Cemento. She has been keeping a dream journal. It's really, really beautiful narrative of growing up with HIV and her many, many different thoughts as they have emerged over time from her childhood to the present moment to be a fierce AIDS activist working in Brazil. So
and a fierce feminist. I've done other work with her, and her writing is incredible and on point.
This is Felix Rodriguez Rosa, and speaking of this question of digital publishing and what what the translation is between the digital space and the space of print. Felix has been publishing a series of photographs of himself in bed every Tuesday morning for 6 years, and looking over his archive, it's so amazing and beautiful, and also just to see the passage of time in his own emotion in this very vulnerable, special space of his bed. the playfulness, his cameos by his cats, his partner smoking a cigarette. They're things that really resonated with Jess and I, because we do spend, you know, so much of our time together. We just like really try and create a bubble for us. This piece just really resonated with us. So shout out to Felix. This is a piece by Dee Stoyskew, who we've actually published a couple times, and is such an awesome, awesome writer and multidisciplinary artist working in like video and many media. This is an excerpt from her poem, and Jess, I don't know if you wanted to read the beginning or if we just want to like allow people to see it, but
yeah, I actually fell in love with this poem before I realized that it was a submission. I was writing another article about her, and I was like, and I was like, they put in backgrounds, incredible. It's this really touching story about their experience trying to reconnect with their Romanian ancestry after leaving when they were a child. So, you know, this piece is, I think one of the things that's actually really interesting in this howler is there are 3 artists who were born with HIV that really, for me,
5.
5.
Yeah.
Okay. My head. Well, there's a number of artists who are born with HIV. Oh yeah, that's true. Lily too. In, for instance, a North American context, this is less visible, but in other places, there are so many kids who are now grown-ups and having children of their own and whatnot, but the experience is completely different when we think of the issue of time and who's been living with HIV for a long time and part of the HIV response. And so,
and also what survival looks like, what a long-term survivor looks like. And we talk about this in the editorial, and a lot of our talk today is kind of drawn from things that we have, you know, put into words in a very succinct form in the editorial. But like, what does it mean when we have these 2 generations of long-term survivors who might be in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and long-term survivors who are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And how can we kind of actually bring these conversations together? It's really special, actually, that being able to represent that in this issue. One of our editorial, we draw on our editorial advisors quite a bit, and one of our editorial advisors, Mike Kiki, had a long time dream to interview Ron Anthea for this issue. We actually have quite a fulsome interview with the 2 of them, so we're going to publish the second part in our next issue. But it was great to work with Ron. He reminded us of this amazing publication, Infected Faggot Perspectives. And this reminder of the continuity of publishing about AIDS, HIV. You know, when we started the paper, we thought, oh, we're going to do a newspaper. It's going to be really like wild, like nobody's doing a newspaper. And then we look back into the archives, and like this piece that Ron sent us, actually in the 80s and 90s, there's such a wealth of published material, and most of it is really amazing, really scrappy, done in newsprint, designed in community. And so this kind of nod to, you know, the complexity and the anger and the just the voice, like the quote at the bottom, dedicated to keeping the realities of faggots living with AIDS and HIV disease in your face until the plague is over. Really resonated with us with this thinking about money, and like how, again, it's like maybe impolite or considered to be not not a topic of conversation that people want to really like dive into. Like, so what does it mean when through this long, lengthening history of HIV/AIDS, we are keeping these realities in the face of our readership? And again, thinking of like the howler as the person who maybe talks too much or is too outspoken. This interview just was really wonderful for us to reflect on that.
Francisco's piece.
Francisco is in the house. We love this piece.
This piece is super fun. I read it many times during the editing process, and every time I was like, "Ooh, I love this line." It was really Francisco.
Yeah, to do a full spread because there's no images. It's just all 100% like amazing. So, I mean, one quotation to maybe pop out is, we want to think about the daddy in all the permutations, and that quote at the bottom, daddies might be
Daddies might be running against the
it.
grain and supporting patriarchal heteronormative values unknowingly or knowingly, but we are also key in dismantling it.
Yes, we love it. Francisco, please give us a wave.
He's the only one I see on my screen, and I love it.
So, I mean, what a fantastic piece. There's been an amazing wave of men in the epidemic of COVID talking about sex and cruising and pleasure and how we find each other amidst this separation, this physical separation. And this piece by Francisco really like highlights it for us. And there's so much good advice and wisdom in the piece. So we had to just kind of give you the full spread. But please enjoy when you read. Francisco, nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Another artist I think who's on the call, Sveta. Jess, this is
Sveta. So Sveta Bonda, I've never said her name out loud, holy smokes. Sveta Bondakenko she's an amazing artist, activist in the HIV drug user LGBTQ community in Kyrgyzstan. We were doing activism one day and I said, "Do you make art?" She's like, she's a classic example of someone who didn't really identify as an artist, but produces incredible work. And she was like, "I've been working on this book," and she brings it to my house, and it's this gorgeous, endless book that just unfolds and unfolds and unfolds and unfolds. And so of course we had to make it the centerfold feature. This piece
is just a tiny snippet of
yeah. It's how many pages? At least 20 folds, and it keeps going. So the endless book is this really beautiful piece, and she shares, if you speak Russian, it's perfect. You can understand it all. If you don't, then that's unfortunate. Then you'll just have the quotes. But it's really this, she talks about her relationship to art as an escape as a young child, and how the endless book is, it creates this world for her, as well as her other art that she does. Yeah, so Sveta, this is you.
And our feature in conversation, this is a really beautiful pairing for us. We always kind of have a inkling of like people we want to bring together, and maybe it's because we're lovers, but this matchmaking impulse, like Jessica has a very, very good skill as a matchmaker. usually like, you know, if you're like at a bar with her in a dance party or whatever, she'll be like, oh, I have to introduce you to this person. You guys are gonna love each other. And it's a special skill that Jessica has. So the In Conversation is really the backbone of the Howler, the foundation of the Howler. We brought together two artists, Glammy Rose Spencer and Jacob Bomi, and I think Glammy is on the call. We adore you, Glammy. Say if you want to wave. This is Jacob's piece, Blood on the Dance Floor, and he's actually the second like dancer, choreographer, artist working in movement, theater, and he has done a lot of work in Australia to carry on and continue traditional dance in indigenous communities. And the interview or the conversation between the two of them, he talks about this amazing moment with this piece where he realized he's been a dancer and choreographer for like decades. And this piece was a very public coming out for him, where he publicly disclosed his HIV status as in his artwork on stage to hundreds of people. And just the process and the realization of what that means on a kind of as your career as an artist progresses and you know, maybe like get more recognition for your practice and you get bigger audiences, and what that intimate moment means and how it feels to do that on stage. This is a piece by Glammy Rose Spencer, who's based in the Bay Area. And I think Jessica's going to join me on the love in for this one.
Yeah, love it.
The metaphors of the work and.
Yeah, this piece, actually all of Glammy's pieces, the trees, as soon as we opened it up and saw that this was part of the submission package, we were absolutely said yes, obviously. I just wanted to say that the pairing between Glammy and Jacob was so beautiful. I was the wallflower that was part of that conversation. It was it was very hard to not jump in and want to be a part of that love fest. If I'm not right, Glammy, it was incredible. But the deep conversation about ancestors and elders really it was the central piece of that In Conversation, and something that really made us want to bring the two of them together to discuss where they draw power from and their long legacy within trans, indigenous, HIV positive communities.
Oh, that's actually me.
That's your sound, yes.
Yeah, that's it. It was like the phone was ringing.
Tell that person to turn off their phone. Oh, it's you.
Yeah. In the interview, another amazing moment that Glammy sort of shares with us is talking. Glammy's a teacher, and I just admire I think for a lot of us who are educators, I just admire the work that it takes to be a queer and trans person, be a person living with HIV, and go into your classroom every day and live that reality and share your experiences. And so many of us teach on the edge of who we are. And Glammy is no exception. She really talks about like her calling being this work as a teacher and blending, her art with being an educator. And she talks about sharing her work with a child who suggested that she make sprouts coming out of the trees stumps. And what a beautiful moment, just this continuity of seeing ancestors in this metaphor of the forest. So Glammy, we hope you'll jump into the chat when we open it up for discussion. yeah, a few other artists, Gabrielle Renzon, Pasado, Presente, Futuro. I hope I'm giving a good account. This issue has Portuguese, Spanish, Russian in it. We really try to represent artists in the language that they work, and it's important to us to at least if we don't have the means to entirely translate the paper into multiple languages, to show the complexity of what it means to have conversations internationally across language. And this series of photographs by Gabrielle really struck us, was really beautiful. And oh, you know, I added this, but I think we can skip it. That might be the last one. Now we can talk about the wage survey. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, so I mean, one of the things we were really excited about with our residency at Real Time and Space was that it allowed us to think differently about what we were publishing and how. And I mean, we definitely have a system for the editorial process of the paper, but we kind of had this inkling with the issue of money in particular that we wanted to go a little deeper and like actually start collecting some research. So I've been working in the Canadian Artist Run Center context for many, many years. And one of the foundations of that context is the payment of artist fees and the recognition that artwork is work and that artists, writers, cultural producers should be financially compensated for the work that they do in our culture. And to be able to have a living wage as an artist. And so we have had a foundation from the beginning with the Howler that we pay artists fees. We have a kind of modest amount for each artist, but we also send the subscriptions internationally to everybody. And so it's been this question of payment of artist fees is really important. We were really inspired by a study that's been happening in Canada for many years called Waging Culture, and they collect really detailed information, recognizing, and I mean, for those of us who are in the States currently, the census was this year, and there was a big push in arts communities and communities of color to really say like, represent in the census, because otherwise those complexities of who lives in our communities and are lost and flattened. And it's really politically important to have this information. So this similar kind of impulse existed for Waging Culture, and it really inspired us to think about how these issues of equity and wages impact artists living with HIV. So we conducted the survey and the beginning of this research really as artists interested in this question, not as, you know, focus group researchers or SHRC recipients or whatever, but really just to hear from the community of artists and readers of the paper. So yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, so when we were doing the survey, we asked about 10 different questions, like where are you from, how much time you dedicate to your practice, pressure you feel to do free work, amongst some of the questions. And one really interesting thing that stood out to me in the wage survey was over 63% felt pressured or expected to do free work. Sorry, Anthea, to do free work or for not-for-profits. So felt compelled to or expected. And that was in contrast to, I believe, 7% said that they, okay, I don't need this one anymore. 7% said that they felt comfortable to choose where they did free volunteer work, which was quite interesting. So this kind of like AIDS industrial complex really supports this idea of people living with HIV are indebted to being forever professional volunteers within the HIV response, which is an absolute shame, especially when we talk about things within HIV movement, such as JIPA or MIPA, which is the greater or meaningful involvement of people living with HIV. But how can this be when the inequalities in inequity of pay balance and pay scale is so great? And there's a real guilt factor to being able to provide service for your community, even if it means that you're continue to be marginalized.
And it's interesting too, like as we deepened our research on this, I had been familiar with JIPA, but I had not read the principles. And the principles of JIPA say create meaningful engagement, but they do not say pay pause people. They do not say financially compensate people who are working with for their time, their expertise, their images, their cultural production. And I mean, really bottom line, like we actually think that has to change. Like that guideline has to acknowledge that people should be financially compensated. And that's kind of one pole of this research that's emerging, but the other pole that's really amazing is how people do make a living and structure their time and practices. And I mean, we were amazed to see the responses from people working and living in so many different countries. We were amazed also to see, we don't have the statistic up, but about 1/3 of the folks who replied were living in North America, so either Canada or the United States, but the remaining 2/3 working outside of the North American context. And so hearing from artists in so many different places, we also realized like the standards for payment of artists' fees or recognition of cultural labor are very different from country to country. And in some cases outside of North America, the standards are higher. And in some cases, we are also hearing from artists in North America who might get offered like $50 to do a speaking engagement. Which, in the grand scheme of things, like that's not paying anybody's rent, it's not paying anybody's meds, it's not paying anybody's like housing, So artists who replied were really resourceful. Some of these numbers, just for folks who might not be able to read on the screen, 63% felt pressured to work for free. But on the positive side of things, 55% of the artists who replied had received public funding to make their work. And in the shadow of the rollback of public funding for artists living with HIV and queer artists in the 90s in the cultural wars, we thought that was a great number. 5% were represented by commercial galleries, whereas and this really spoke to like the hustle, like folks patching together different streams of income. 29% own their own business, and another 29% worked or held down jobs in aid service organizations. We also heard from folks working in sex work, working in university professor jobs, and kind of like a really amazing spectrum. And, we also wanted to acknowledge like members of our community who are artists who are not able to work because of disability or mental health, but who, also replied and gave us some really, good information to think about. How do we support members of our community who are artists and cultural producers, but are not able to make their work at this time? And Yeah, so another great one that we thought was 1/3 of the artists who replied also spend 100% of their time on their practice. And so that was a really great, thing to see, that there is a group of artists who are dedicating full time to their practice. So, there's that graphic, just in case it was a little unclear in the first one, just to a little bit bigger. And one of the things we did to close the survey, and we just want to spend a second on this, was we asked the question, if money was no object, what would your dream project be? And we were really heartened, and it just kind of speaks to the culture of living at the intersections of art and activism. More than half of the artists said that they wanted to do something that would benefit community, that they either like, their dream was to host residency spaces for other artists living with HIV, or open a gallery space. People wanted to make films, and even open like safe spaces and shelters. So.
And another piece that a number of the artists also talked about was just like, they need to have, in order to focus on their art, this is a good quote, I would need health insurance and rent money. So just basic necessities in order to actually participate in their practice. And I think that this is, it's really interesting because, I think this piece also comes in Luisa Lindani's piece about people living with HIV need a bit more than just the basic necessities. You need proper food to eat, to take with your treatment. You need to take your treatment. And this really is a whole nother level.
I think that's all for the survey. Oh, maybe just one more thing about the survey. Okay. We are releasing this first wave of information as part of just a little like snippet of the editorial for Time and Money. But in the spring, we'll do a broadsheet that just focuses on the survey. We just had so much great information that we want to share. And also kind of produce it as a tool for arts organizations and community organizations to be able to use and understand and advocate for payment of artist fees. And it's never rude to ensure that you as an artist are getting paid, even though that's a difficult conversation. We hope that maybe this survey can also be a resource for artists to advocate for themselves. And
fun to say no.
What's that?
It's fun to say no sometimes.
Yes.
Boundaries. Would you like to do this for free? No, I would not. Thank you.
The artists who replied were also really generous with suggestions about how we could expand the survey and deepen the research. And so there was many questions. We didn't want to overwhelm people at the beginning, but there was many questions we wanted to ask and many sort of threads of conversation we wanted to pick up on. And so the last question was also, if you could ask more questions about this topic, what would they be? And so, artists said, like, how many years of your practice? Are you emerging, mid-career, senior artist? Have you received, like, what are the amounts of grants or the frequencies of grants that you've been receiving? What media are folks working in? Obviously, there's many differences between the visual arts and literary fields, for example. So this is really like the beginning, I think, of a bigger project for us. So we are really excited to save some time for conversation, and this is perfect timing. So Jess, do you want to have the final word before we open it up to just
Yeah,
enjoy
so
some time with everyone?
I guess we are deeply honored to once again publish another edition of the HIV Howler. People living with HIV, you can contact either Anthea or myself, probably Anthea, she has all the papers, to get a free subscription, and we'll mail you one. For organizations or people not living with HIV, we ask if you could purchase some. This is how we help fund the paper and also pay artist fees. So it all kind of folds back in. Yeah, okay, let's open it up. We talked too long.
No, you talked for the perfect amount of time.
Okay, fine.
And everybody who's on this call, just so people are clear, if you provided your address in the registration, we're sending a free issue. This is through CCA's exhibition fund that we're able to do this, and we're really grateful to just extend that conversation to this whole community. You know, I mean, I'm really honored too to do this work in the context of CCA, because one of the things that I've noticed over 10 years as a prof in an art school is that there's a whole generation of queer and trans students who are growing up, who becoming artists, who don't necessarily recognize the deep, deep, deep impact of HIV/AIDS on the cultural sphere and their practices. And they really, really do not talk about HIV. And in addition, particularly in America, this is something that really affects communities of color and queer and trans communities very deeply. And to do this work in a university context, in a college context, I think, and be able to have these conversations amongst faculty and students is so, so important. So thank you. And yeah, we're excited to see everybody. And so cue the dance party, and yeah, watch the mail for your paper.
Does anyone have any questions? Oh, I'm not facilitating this.
Oh, yeah. But you want to jump in? We're just taking your job.
Because there's also some of the artists who are here that could maybe share a few words.
Screen, so just
you have to stop sharing.
Oh yeah, I'll stop sharing. Great. Now we can all be together.
Would Glammy or Sveta or Francisco, Dean, I think Martha is also here from South Africa, like to share anything about the Howler or the submission?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, very briefly. So I'm Francisco Ibanez Carrasco, and I'm one of those who, you know, tooth and nail have climbed up the, if not the salary rank, but the academia, right? As an HIV positive person, have the incredible, you know, luck and fortune of working with folks like Jessica over the years and staying in touch. I just want to say that, you know what, this moves me. I just sent a message to Jessica separately, you know, thinking about some places where we could present it. I think this is so far apart from what, for example, I'm in the School of Public Health, the Dalilana School of Public Health. People don't think about this kinds of thing at all in terms of their messaging. It's all very formal and official, and you know, from a top-down point of view, all the things that you've said, so they resonate with me. And the last thing is, you know, because I'm so old, I wrote for the disease, the new disease, what was it called, the NDP, the new disease pariah, in the, like, I don't know, 1941 or something like that. So I'm always so grateful that the young folks they invite me to speak. So thank you. That's all. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
That's amazing. We actually, we've always wanted to do something with Disease Pariah because it's, it's a historical document. And well, Jessica asked me not to like fully spill the beans on all the upcoming themes that we're talking about, but we really, take a cue from that publication to think about humor. And there's been some amazing work produced in the last 30 years and currently about humor. And so it's possible future theme.
Yeah, we were so scared of each other, right? And nobody could say anything funny about HIV, including us, the victims and the patients. And I'm making, for those who are not seeing, I'm making like, air signs or whatever. So, and still is the thing, right? Like either you're a patient and victim in any kind of condition. And so to have this kind of publications where people can look at it from a different perspective is truly necessary, not only inspiring.
I see Sveta is done. Yeah, go.
Hi, Sveta.
Hi, me too. I did something funny this year, we did with Kyrgyzstan, Jessica knows this team, LGBT, this team, we did some funny videos also about HIV this year, and I go for teenagers team and also to libraries like this, and we did really something funny. It wasn't something like only the words, how you can catch it, or I don't know, some riff. No, we did it with the fun. We did it with some real stories, and I show my face in the end, короче, for everybody. Open face, I did, yeah. And because the positive what I can deliver for them, my light, I don't know how to call it, but people really they come like and funny and. It's helping for people who's going on with the self-stigma. It's very helping them. Like it should do anybody, Even it's Kyrgyzstan, this country is like something not so nice, but someone should, and it's me.
Thank you.
I lived in Kyrgyzstan for the last 3 years, and Sveta is really an inspiration there. It's a tough country for people. It's one of the only countries that has an HIV travel ban, meaning that you can't really be open about your HIV status publicly. The impacts, especially for children, families, partners, jobs, and losing all that is 100% a reality. Same for LGBTQ community. Basically criminalized. There's lots of violence to our trans sisters that are there. It's actually quite shameful. And for drug users, for weed, you can get like 8 months, a year in prison for having a joint. So Sveta's art and activism is so important, and the fact that she just went openly public on the media actually a few days ago is a huge deal, huge deal. So thanks, Sveta.
Yeah, really, when I came to Kyrgyzstan and I go this way to activism, I changed my family name because my nationality is this like a Chechenian people. Anybody can come and kill me because I'm protecting the people from these communities. Everybody hate, like it's not allowed to do it all and how I look and all this stuff. So I changed my name. I take my mother first name and I did myself like I'm Ukrainian girl. This is now well done. No one can ask me or push me to stop doing my things or kill me, for example. Like, I wish no one kill me, huh?
I hope no one kills you either.
Yeah.
Glammy or Dean, Martha, do you want to say a thing or two? Glammy, you're unmuted. Perfect.
I unmuted myself, so I guess I have to speak. Hi. So many things I want to say. I'm really I'm excited about the idea of humor. When I first became HIV positive, all I could do was crack jokes actually for 2 days until I watched a movie. I think I watched United in Anger, and then I started crying. And I think humor is like such an important way that we cope, or at least that I cope with like literally everything. This has been just such an honor, you know, like I'm not a full-time artist. And like in the survey, I think I might have been the one, or like I also like I need health insurance and I need like to have my rent paid and all of these things. And I think I'm really grateful for the opportunity that just like people that y'all get something out of my work. This experience has been beautiful, and just the pairing with Jacob, I agree, you're such a good matchmaker. It was just such a beautiful conversation. I'm so excited for others to read it. I like rereading it. It's cool to see our words like in print, and I'm just so grateful, and it's an honor. And all of the artists, like all the artists you present today are so incredible. In the writing, and I'm just like pretty blown away, and I'm so happy to be here. So thank you so much.
And I like how Dean also has some of his pieces in the background.
Yes, I'll share my screen one more time to show Dean's piece. But Dean, I mean, you're here and you have your work in the background, which is amazing.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to say hello?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, that's a piece I'm working on at the moment. There's always something else in the pipeline. I've always kind of worked since sort of, sorry, it's 5 a.m. here. It was a really early start. So I'm really excited to actually be part of this publication. The art that I've been producing has been me exploring my diagnosis, which is only a couple of years old, and the kind of the emotional response to that, and being able to sort of get that out of me onto the canvas, and now to the world, a greater population, has been extremely exciting, and I'm thrilled to be part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. We have, even though we're very, didactic and we love, activism, we also really love abstraction. And it's always amazing to see artists working in abstraction, like Sveta's book and Dean's paintings. I'm gonna flash a painting of Dean's on the screen right now so people can see. But those possibilities to say something that cannot be actually said, but to express something through abstraction. We have a little love for abstraction. Just thank you for showing your work, Dean. Here's the piece. There we go. Tiny bit pixelated, I apologize, but 2 paintings of Dean's in the paper. Survival's Not a Sin and Isolation.
Yeah. Also, I just want to do a shout out because Martha is joining from South Africa. If you want to say something, you're a part of that powerful article that Loiso said and did. And I don't know if you came in time to see some of your.
I will go to Martha's piece.
Martha, can you unmute?
Oh, there we go.
Maybe she can't.
It's no pressure, really. It's
no pressure.
Very nice to see everybody. Yeah. So, I mean, we're very interested also to, continue the conversation about wages, artist fees, or any aspect of like the publishing process as well. Interested to hear what people have to say on that regard. Yeah, go ahead.
Go. Siobhan, it's you.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm writing a book called Be Amsterdam, which is about Black-owned businesses and entrepreneurs in Amsterdam. And I can't find a publisher because I think it's assumed that there won't be a Black readership or anybody interested in a book like that. It's taken me about 3 years just to kind of find a designer and put it together, but I can't get funding, I can't get publishing rights. It's really, yeah, I'm a bit disappointed actually that the Dutch kind of publishing industry isn't more forward thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm part Dutch, and having spent a little bit of time in Holland, there is a very intense double standard around race in particular, and a kind of cultural amnesia of the Dutch role of colonialism and its impacts in communities of color who are living in Holland now. But I will be happy to connect you with an amazing activist, Jessica. Her name is also Jessica, but she works at the Black Archives in Amsterdam. And yeah, okay. So maybe you know her already, but
I know Mitchell, but I don't know Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we've noticed too, and maybe folks can speak on this because many of the folks on our call have actually written memoirs or written about their experiences for various different publications. When publishing the Howler, we really see that folks are pushed into this narrow story of what you're allowed to write about as a pause person. And that the things that gain attention of presses sometimes push people to actually tell their stories in particular ways, to follow a very predictable narrative. And one of the things that we always try and do is like uplift writing that is maybe scrappier or speaks to the complexity or doesn't follow that exact narrative arc of what might be kind of like appealing to a mainstream publisher, where like the story resolves and it's very kind of like nice, it ends with a happy ending.
And show their resilience.
Yes. So, I mean, that's a big mandate for us, is to just like allow people to speak in their own voice and publish work that might...
Messy.
What's that?
It's messy.
Yes. We love Lily's piece for that reason, because it's a dream narrative, so it's totally subconscious.
And the drawings are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I personally love the drawings. Another thing that we wanted to talk about. I just lost my...
Martha put something in the chat, so I just want to read it since we called on.
Yeah.
Yes, Martha said, how can we assure that our government funds help others living with HIV in other areas besides being an artist, or others who are afraid to disclose about their artists who are afraid to disclose about their status?
I think that's a bit of a tricky one. I think even beyond governments, how do communities support each other to kind of hold people who want to disclose or talk about things that they could experience pushback or stigma or discrimination, the things that people don't always want to talk about, that don't fit into a nice little social norm. I think by having... I don't know. I think depending on governments to kind of do that work for us is a bit top down, and it's how do we together as communities, especially like queer communities, but also mind you, we aren't all part of queer communities, and not all it's complicated. Queer communities can't always be that visible in different places. I see Sveta nodding, yes.
One thing I think about in your question, Martha, is also like, sometimes we're part of overlapping communities, and for, you know, one person, it might be the queer community and the art community. For another, it might be the activist community, or working within your own local area. But the beauty of having this global conversation amongst artists living in so many different places is that there's tools that people have produced from their own context can be adapted to other contexts, like looking in the Canadian context about the work that CARFAC has done, which is advocate for the payment of artists' fees. And so other artists living in other countries could use that as an advocacy tool to share with, you know, I mean, whether we like it or not, we all have to talk to policy people sometimes, but, you know, to share with policymakers or to share with city councils who are doing arts funding. So some of those tools, I think, like as we continue with the wage survey, we're gonna assemble some resource kit of artists' advocacy for payment of artists' fees and wage equity that's happening in many different countries, because there's definitely incredible work that we can point to and people can, you know, draw from in their own advocacy too.
And I think, but this piece around disclosure, I think, Martha, you role model it as an artist who is openly living with HIV and is using their art on public forums. And I think, you know, you plant a seed for other artists to feel empowered, for lack of a better word, to potentially be open about their status, to align with you, to to connect. So the disclosure piece is very tough, and I think that as POS people, we learn about that and feel safe in some ways through role modeling. So you're the one starting it. Okay. Any kind of, I'm just looking at time, any kind of final things people want to bring up or ask her?
I have a question. Firstly, I just want to thank you all. This has been really beautiful and lovely to listen to, and I'm excited to see it in person. But I wanted to ask about just about your design and printing process, and how you choose your type or design your type, or if you just want to speak more about that, I would love to hear any details.
That's all, Anthea.
Thank you so much for asking that question.
Anthea is thrilled right now.
Yeah, I mean, okay, short answer. Well, when we first started, we were like, why is stuff in, you know, doctors' offices or like advocacy groups, like, why is stuff so ugly? And like, again, we're always thinking of this idea like that comes up in Kiki's piece, Your Arts-Informed Research is Killing Me, which is in issue 3. And Kiki is like, why don't we get good design? Why don't we get nice typography? Why don't we get an acknowledgement from, you know, medicine or law or whatever, that there's aesthetics involved in our experiences as queer and trans people, our experiences with HIV. And so we wanted to like make something that departed from the like red and black and white color scheme. We wanted to make something that departed from like the messages that, you know, it's always trying to tell you something or get you to do something or get you to adhere to something. So that was kind of the foundation, just to recognize that like there could be a different aesthetic. And also, I mean, and I don't want to say anything badly about this because the history is incredible, but in the canon of AIDS art, there is a narrow group of works that are presented, but there's such a wealth of amazing publication design from the 80s and 90s, like AIDS Action Now in Toronto put out amazing publications. There's a lot of, like, as we showed, the piece that Ron sent us, Infected Faggot Perspectives, there's a lot of great, scrappy, awesome DIY design. And so we kind of felt empowered by that work as well. In terms of choosing type, we decided that we would kind of template things, and we launched our first issue in Amsterdam, and we really wanted to choose a typeface by a Dutch designer. The designer of the main typeface we use is Radim Pesco. And we also kind of were like, we wanted to have really great color. And so we always choose like a spot color that's reflecting the theme. The issues are always have a mono image on the front that's like a feature artwork, but just converted to one color. So yeah, I mean, there's so many little things, and it's like a really fun part of the process for me. And I think like, just gonna talk about design in a certain way, which maybe this is the last thing I'll say about this. Design happens on many different levels, and Jessica really is like the architect and the leader and person who has the vision around the kind of community that we're building. And that is a process of engagement, and it is a process of building something and networking. And that is a very like, it's a process that Jessica has designed in some of her past projects like Tea Time, this designing like an engagement strategy for women living with HIV to come together in domestic space. And so that question of like what design is also, you know, interesting to us. Like design can be building a community, and design can also happen like on the page. And I guess too, like we want to treat the publication as a gallery space and a discursive space as much as it is a physical object that you can hold in your hands. And so yeah, thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, and a bit of history. The first three that Anthea designed them, and we worked on them and published them within, I believe it was 5 days through the AIDS conference. It was a wild marathon of late nights, borderline fights, and then lots of partying right after because it was so much work.
Now we have this like extended process.
Yeah. And during this COVID time, it was so interesting, especially because this was the time money. We had resources. We apparently had lots of time because we weren't able to physically be together. We were supposed to launch it in July, but it took a really long time. As you know, many communities and people were just unable to shift and move. One of the things that we actually like with this issue is we realized we got a lot of COVID work around COVID that people were doing quite quickly because they must have been on it within the first few weeks because you know, May 1st was the deadline, and there was already a lot of things in the submission packages before that. But we really had an editorial, the advisory committee came together and discussed having works about COVID, and we decided no, that we didn't want to really reference it, that the history of the HIV response and the work that people have been creating for years and decades, still, we really wanted it strongly to be the theme that we discussed with Frederick a long time before. So,
And we're at time, so sadly, I think
Yeah,
that's the end of the questions, but maybe we can come together, and I'll thank Jessica and Anthea for sharing all this information with us. Thank you to the artists who are present and who are joining us from all around the world. Thank you to all the participants who asked questions and shared. The wage study was really interesting, and that is such important work that isn't maybe always as glamorous as art making feels, but is really what fuels everyone's livelihoods and life. So thank you for that. And Kiko, I don't know if you want to say anything, some last words just to send us off today.
Yes, just thank you so much, Anthea and Jessica, for not only the amazing work, but the great talk. We look forward to future events with and what y'all will be doing.
Thank you. And we'll have some more info about upcoming things that we're doing as part of this extended series. Through the spring, we're doing 4 more events. And so watch the mail, watch the Instagram, and thank you for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. And we can share out the link of the recorded call to everyone who attended if you couldn't make it.
And I always love to end a Zoom call with, if everybody could just turn on their microphone and just say goodbye as they go. It's so nice to hear the little chorus of folks. Thank you for coming. Goodbye.
Bye.
Have a wonderful
Bye. Take care.
afternoon, evening, or sleep.
See you.